Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Understanding Autism in the Workforce module. My name is Van Salvador, and I'll be your presenter for today. Now, before we get started with the module, I made a beginning activity earlier in my pre-work. I had asked everyone to just write a response to one of the questions, as well as dropping the card off in front of my office. And throughout the presentation, I'll be adding my comments that I've read and took note of while I look through everyone's responses. And I think it'll be a really good way to engage everyone and see all the responses that you guys have done. So thank you. So what is ASD? ASD can be abbreviated for autism spectrum disorder. It is a neurological disorder that affects a person's behavior, and it can be noted that anyone can get this. It's not delegated to a particular group or a particular age range. Anyone on any age can be diagnosed. Um, Anyone can be affected. Mild to severe symptoms, it can be present in people diagnosed with ASD. Some symptoms include, but not limited to, problems with social communication, social interaction, repetitive behaviors. Uh, this is not indicative of everyone with ASD, and it shouldn't, like this list of symptoms isn't a one and all deal. Everyone is different. And it should we should all take note that not all of this is one defined piece of someone with ASD. And how does autism play out in everyday lives of people with ASD? Uh, People with ASD are often misunderstood. They're subjected to terrible stereotypes and as well as undermined. I like to, in my opinion, some people like to give them superpowers, even though, it's not, superpowers or it's like certain strengths or traits that are associated with people with ASD. They're understood in ways that uh not a lot of people know about ASD or people with ASD, or sort of the background knowledge of what it even is. And some negative stereotypes can also affect not only people with ASD as well as regular normal people who try to look into ASD, and they might form these negative opinions or stereotypes or common myths about people with ASD. Like, for example, they can be aggressive, or they're not educated, or they lack empathy, or they show too much emotion, they show too little emotion. And there's so many factors at play that people tend to not see, or they narrow their mind into saying that ASD is this one thing and everyone with ASD has all of this, and that's just not true. They're also undermined. They're not, they're people, in the end of the day, they're still people with their own thoughts and abilities. And it's just good principle to treat everyone with that same respect, even though no matter how different or how different they appear to be. And I want to bring up the topic of Asperger's. And this was also a note from one of the responses that I got. Vanessa said that is no longer used, and that is correct. In my research, I found that it's no longer used because of negative connotations during World War II and the whole subjugating people with ASD. And it was just a terrible time back then. And since then, people have stopped, or the system has stopped uh saying Asperger's and ASD is sort of the same thing. It's sort of a dead term, basically. Next, I will be talking about the three dimensions of social inequality. First, is systemic, and if we turn to the pre-work, I had set an example of each of these three with an article. But to basically sum it up, in systemic inequality, people with ASD lack information in healthcare as well as knowledge with ASD, and they face a constant uphill battle to even fight for recognition in the healthcare or in insurance department. Um, there's a lack of providers who are willing to even like dip their toes into people with ASD, and the lack of information is what I would like to call, in my opinion, like a cycle of doom, because people go to these sources and think that they're reliable, and in the end, they're turned away. Next, I'll be talking about institutional. It's not just this inequality is not just restricted to hospitals, but also seeps into workplaces as well. Discrimination against people with ASD is pretty high. In my research, I found that people with ASD got job rejections left and right, rejected from opportunity. Think of like school, universities, as I said earlier, workplaces, jobs. And it's just not right that these institutions would turn them away when they're just regular people looking for an opportunity. And in the end, they're just being really discriminatory to people with ASD. And the next is interpersonal. From what I found, it's a little mix of both of the previous points. Social exclusion, isolation, limited opportunities. Think people with ASD are sort of relegated away for like out of the public eye, or they don't have much opportunities for socializing or are restricted to socializing if they do get into university or a school or a work or a job if they're able to get into it, and as well as like the lack of healthcare as mentioned before, and systemic and bullying and discrimination and stereotypes and negative stigma. Next, I will be talking about understanding autism. So some characteristics and challenges are social cues, interactions, think making eye contact, forming relations. People with ASD tend to sort of um, it's not a collective 100% agree, but most do find they do find difficulty forming friendships and relations, well as uh, comprehension and social cues, and saying, for example, saying things out of topic. Uh, Next is environmental and sensory difficulties. Take, for example, light sensitivity, overstimulating images, fast imagery, all of that can sort of affect people with ASD. And it's a common misconception that people with ASD are good with fast things because they're able to like focus on different things. While that may be true for some people, again, as I said earlier, it's not a collective like fact for everyone, and everyone with ASD is different. And capable versus incapable, abled versus disabled. I don't like saying these terms in my opinion because it sort of degrades and demeans the said person with ASD, and sort of forcing them into a category or bubble that's saying, oh, you're not capable or you're not incapable or you're able to you're disabled. Um, I just, in my opinion, it's not something that we should strive to do. Mm, Next is the impact of autism in the workplace. Uh, domestic, sorry about, it's a drastic change from people in the work life and personal life. So for an example, people working, in a job versus people at home, it's a drastic change. It's hard to balance a life on its own from work to personal life. Um, some are in a new environment. It's very difficult for people with ASD to sort of keep up with a new environment because people with ASD tend to like consistency and routines. And as well as array of new faces, people with ASD tend to have difficulty matching names to faces or vice versa. So the workplace isn't quite exactly a friendly place for people with ASD. So let's look for ways to accommodate them. So a few things that we can accommodate people with ASD is to really a good thing is education. Education can fix a lot of problems associated with misconceptions or myths with ASD. And it might seem like a small step, but it really is a long-lasting impact to people not only with ASD, but people around understanding people with ASD. And education can also diffuse the common myths and stereotypes associated with autism. Uh, just like in I believe one of the responses I got from Stevens, he said that creating a safe space can be a good accommodation for people with autism, and I do agree with that. And as well as being involved with people who has ASD and best practices for people with autism. As I said earlier, considerations. People with ASD have a hard time with fast-moving images, colors, all of that. They like consistency, routine. Basically, they like to follow a schedule. Mental and physical support. People with ASD should have access to that if they need information, and as well as other supportive services, not just the stuff that you find in the internet and all that. Possibly a good place to start is sort of having these like sort of little discussions. Next, I will be talking about EY. EY is an organization that seeks to create a better working world for people with ASD by putting up the stories of people with ASD in the light. So, well, I'm gonna read some statistics from EY, and this is a survey taken with people with ASD. One out of six of autistic adults are in full-time employment, meaning one out of six of them have jobs, and less than 16% of survey applicants have a full-time job, and 51% said that their skills were higher than required. That basically means that if they weren't, if they didn't have ASD, their skills were basically put on a higher pedestal, or it's a higher requirement. 32% are paid in are paid, and 77 would want to find a job and work. However, due to the negative stigmas, as well as the bad sort of ideas when it comes to people with ASD in the workplace, they have uh, had a hard time finding jobs lately. Um, Next, I will be talking about a few personal stories like Sam Briefer. His father was worried about him because he was out of college and he possibly was not able to get a job, but because of EY, he was able to land a good job. And Sam's not just the only person who has benefited greatly from EY, as well as Yvonne Metcalf, as well as James Mitchell. These three have had jobs under EY and are helping others to sort of broaden their horizons and see not only see that ASD is not only a thing that we should embrace in the workplace, but as well as something that we should recognize. And the conclusion is people with autism is just as capable as you or me, and people with autism want more education and better understanding. As we see with EY, it can really help people with ASD, and not only that, maybe broaden their horizons and not and see and accommodate more people and not just ASD or maybe some other um another field. The workplace can be where people with ASD can shine. Um, it it's not a one and true definition, but some people with ASD have found great success in the workplace, just like any other person without ASD. And that will be it. I hope everyone has learned something new.